You're listening to Goat Rodeo. Keep an ear out for us.
So, what do you do? My name is Stephanie Logan, and this is DC Diary. Let's get to know each other. I am an idealist and an optimist, an avid coffee drinker, and almost unbelievably type A. I'm navigating the ins and outs of starting my career in the nation's capital. I live and work in the District of Columbia, and I'm totally in love with this town. History, culture, art, power, money, and influence, it's all wrapped up in a silky ribbon of public service. I think a lot about this city and what it means, both to the people in and outside the Beltway. But in between trips to the dry cleaner and the 5th networking coffee of the week, how are we actually connecting with each other? A few months ago, I set out with a tape recorder to collect stories from DC professionals about their work. But what I learned along the way was that I didn't really want to know about their work. I wanted to know about them. What you'll hear on this show is stories that are told in one-on-one interviews and candid conversations from the recording booth at our DC Diary happy hour events. You won't catch these kind of stories on your nightly news or your morning update or on your news feed, because this show isn't really about politics. It's about people. We're often told that our city is a swamp or that we're all party to the Washington cartel, but what I hope you'll find from this show is that DC isn't just like House of Cards or just like Veep. Okay, it's kind of just like Veep, but that's not my point. It's a place where people come to make a difference, and it shouldn't be defined by anyone other than those of us who are living it. So, firsthand, from the Capitol, here's what it's all about.
What is the Beltway?
That's a good question. You want to answer it? Because I don't really know how to explain that.
I think the Beltway is a metaphor for two different things. One, the Beltway is a metaphor for the Washington insiders, the political people, and outside the Beltway is the rest of America.
Okay.
But I also see the Beltway as a divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Oh, that's a good show, actually.
Right. It is.
On Oprah.
Yeah.
Oprah's channel.
You have the people who've been here,
Yep.
the non-political people, the Salvadorians,
Yeah.
the Ethiopians.
Yes.
They're in the Beltway too.
Mhm.
And we don't talk about them when we say the Beltway, but we should.
Yes.
DC has made my ego very large. I think that I assume that people in other cities just don't get it. And maybe they don't, but maybe getting it is not the most important thing in the world. I wish I knew less about... Oh, it's a tough one. The worst kind of person in DC is somebody who works in politics just because they sort of fell into it. And they're working on issues that are really important to a lot of people, but they don't actually care. They don't really have any interest in it. They treat it like a job instead of like something that really matters.
I loved Washington. I mean, I still do. I still love it. But so when I was at American, I just sort of fell in love with the city, and I felt in love with the business the city was in. You know, politics in particular, more than policy. Though I did have a lot of friends who worked on the Hill, and I don't know. There's this energy around Washington, particularly political Washington. You know, when you're in your 20s and your 30s in particular, and you know, there's just this. Energy around it, and you could go out and meet new people, and there's always something happening and always opportunities to network. And so I went out a lot, and I really had a great time. I got to meet just a lot of really interesting people, and my girlfriends, you know, that I'm still friends with to this day, you know, we felt like we were changing the world. It was a really great time.
What was it? What was the, like, I know there's like a kind of an intoxication around politics, but what is that? Is it like influence or power or what?
Sure. I mean, I think there was definitely some of that. I mean, I remember when I met my first member of Congress, you know, just sitting at a bar, and he had a drink, and he was with friends and I was with friends, and I was just like so incredibly impressed by that. And then, you know, of course, like 3 months later, after you've met a ton of them, you're just sort of jaded and you're like, whatever, you know? I don't really care about you. But it was, there was something about power that, is pretty, standard. I think the thing too, I don't know, it felt like, and this is going to sound, it's noticing how much I sound like my parents now that I'm older. It was a different time, and it really felt like who was in the Congress mattered, and that things were happening, and it felt like a more dynamic environment, and it felt more honestly substantive, and I think people would laugh at that, but when we went out and we would be talking or lobbying or like hanging out with people, I don't know if maybe I was naive to it and perhaps it was a whole bunch of theater, but it all just feels like theater now. And that, TV and, sound bites and social media has like just totally replaced like whatever that very dynamic fabric and energy was that, was Capitol Hill in the mid 90s to like, I got there like 97, so, like mid 90s to 2005 or whatever. It was a very different place.
That was Sarah Brewer. She's a consultant. Sarah wasn't the only longtime Washingtonian to say that the city feels like it's changed. And for someone like me, and for a lot of my friends, we're cutting our teeth at a time when a lot of people feel that politics have become impossible. And that feels both scary and almost exciting sometimes. Here's my friend Emily, a Senate staffer, talking about what it's like on the Hill today. Oh, and for those of you wondering, all the clips in the episode today were recorded in the fall of 2016, so just before the 2016 election. Okay, here's Emily.
In terms of the Hill, I think there's this perception that the two parties hate each other and we don't get along and we can't work together. But there is a far greater effort than people realize or know to be bipartisan. And I would say that the two parties agree on 85-90% of things. And it's the 10% that gets held up. And you can write legislation that deals with the 85%, the 90%, but it doesn't go anywhere because the 10% is what catches people's eye. And that's what they get caught up on. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And it comes from both sides of people saying, if you're a Democrat office, if you're working with Republicans, you're getting accused of not caring about the poor and pandering to the majority. And if you're a Republican and you're, working with Democrats, you're getting accused of being in the president's pocket and being a Republican in name only and things like that. And it's really hard to get things done when that's the perception in the world. And there's so much good that could be done if it all wasn't focused on the 10 or 15% that people disagree on.
What do you struggle with?
Connecting with people. It's hard to know who's getting to know you because they want to get to know you and who's getting to know you because it might be advantageous to know you someday. And I think earlier you talked about a lot of relationships being surface level, and I didn't realize just how frustrated I was with that and how much I was struggling with being happy here until I went and visited some of my friends from college who I don't have to try with them anymore because they've known me for years and they know who I am and they know my flaws and they know the good things about me. Mm-hmm. It was so easy and natural to be with them, and I come here and half the time I don't feel like I can be myself totally. That's very cliche, but it's very true. You never know who you're meeting, so you always have to have your game face on. You always have to be impressive. And that's difficult. And it's difficult to show people your weaknesses in that environment.
It's interesting, actually. So we've done, I think, 10 interviews so far, and we've asked the question, what are your professional insecurities? And especially amongst the young people, there's just like a real resistance to be vulnerable. And it's like, if I had asked you what's your professional insecurity, it's like, oh, well, I think I could improve my writing. And it's like, those are weaknesses in your skills, but that doesn't tell me anything about your insecurity. And I think especially amongst young people, there's just like such a fear of being found out. And truly, when I ask you your insecurity, and if you can't tell me what it is, your insecurity is being insecure.
I can tell you what my insecurity is. I don't have any background in what I work on. I have had to learn it on myself, either through teaching myself, reading and researching, or asking experts. And that's a huge insecurity for me, is that I'm just not naturally knowledgeable about this. And I think a lot of that comes from the expectation from people that you are an expert on this. They expect that if you work on this issue, you know everything about it. Mm-hmm. And I've been on the phone with people before where I will say, I'm not familiar with what you're talking about right now. Can you explain it to me a little bit? They say, what do you mean you're not familiar with this? Isn't this what you work on? Shouldn't you know this? And that's a huge insecurity, because you want people to trust when they come to you with concerns that you're going to do what you can for them. And for the most part, we try to, but sometimes we can't do things. And if you don't have a ready answer for people, they're not happy and they're upset and they're angry, and that's when they lose faith in government.
Most people that know me as sort of an honest dealer and a straight shooter. I think I've built my reputation over a long period of time. So most people that know a little bit about me probably have some insight into who I am.
That's Mary Ellen McGuire. She founded a nonprofit that trains Hill staff on higher education policy.
Certainly most people that know me understand my commitment to my family and my work-life balance. But one thing that caught me off guard when I was leaving the White House was there were a few people that I wanted to tell personally. So I would call them and tell them, and there's one particular lobbyist on the outside that I said, I'm going to be leaving at the end of the month. And I was pregnant, but I wasn't really ready to share that yet. I said, I've only been married a year. It's time for me to spend time with my family. And really came down hard on me and questioned why I would do such a thing, and questioned my motives, and thought I was giving up too much. And I remember leaving, a few people asking me, oh, you didn't like it, did you? And I'm like, I loved it. I loved my job. I loved the people I worked for. But this is a town, when you say I'm leaving for family reasons, people question that. People that know me know not to question that. So that was actually pretty discouraging, that people don't believe that we are the kind of place where people mean what they say.
Do you think there's inherent distrust among people?
That's sad to think about that. When I was on the Hill, I didn't feel that way. If I were certainly if you watch the news, that certainly seems to be the case. Washington certainly has changed since I've left the Hill 8 years ago. I would imagine it takes longer to build trust now than maybe it has in the past. I think the political climate, especially over this last year, has turned so negative. This isn't just about being a Republican or a Democrat. Some of the things that are being said and advanced are making people really question, what it is that our democracy stands on and the value of public service. And I actually think, I do worry about people turning away from public service because they now believe that Washington is a very toxic place that can't be turned back. I don't think that's I think that we will recover from all that's been going on over the last year. Things may look different in a year or two. Not just the political makeup of the legislative and executive branches and sort of the landscape of what we would call the groups or the advocacy groups in town and how they interact with each other. I'd like to think we get to a point where we've maybe gone so far in a negative direction that we check ourselves and come back to, I would certainly hope, a renewed sense of civility here in town.
How do we do that?
I think people have to be willing to put their differences aside, and that's really hard to do. People have to, people talk about what's best for the country and advancing the country, and the way you do that is by being willing to compromise. And we have to get past the rhetoric. And so, politicians, political staff in town, that's what they need to do. They need to be willing to compromise, hear the other side, get to know each other as people, so that they are more willing to hear other people's points of views. We've gotten to a point where people don't see people as people anymore. And then certainly on the outside, as citizens and participants in the democracy, the thirst now for the rate at which people watch and almost seem to crave all this negativity in the news, sort of the salaciousness of all of it. We have to take responsibility as citizens. We have to step back. We have to educate ourselves. People need to get their news from a variety of sources. You need to question. That's what democracy is about. We take responsibility for our individual roles, and we have to question. You have to think through sources. You have to be willing to listen to different points of views. You need to be willing to sit with your neighbors and your relatives and people that don't look like you and you've never had the opportunity to interact with, and just recognize that we're all in this together. I mean, we are so interconnected on this planet. It's not just about the United States. We have to care about what happens to each other.
I'm going to talk about working, because I'm currently at a crossroads where I really don't like my job. And that's fine. Not many people do like their job. But I feel like something that you do 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week should be something you enjoy. And not many people enjoy that. So I kind of wonder why. Why do you do this thing that you hate or that you don't like just to get money, just to survive? And the typical answer is because it's what you need to do. But what if you didn't have to do that? What if there was another way? What if there was a way that you could do something that you truly enjoy, something you're passionate about, without actually giving up that part of yourself, without actually giving up giving a part of your soul up to something that you don't really give a shit about or care about at all? Like, I work in a firm that I don't really care what they do. Every day I don't really give a shit about it at all. But I do it because I need the money and because I need to survive somehow. But I don't like giving away my soul, giving away a piece of myself, 8 hours of my day, all of my brain power, to something that I don't enjoy.
All right, let me ask you this. So, in your early 20s, or early 30s, or late 20s, early 30s, you talked a little bit about, being in politics and policy and all that, like running around and doing the DC thing.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that you were a DC insider? Do you feel now that you're a DC insider? Do you want to be a DC insider?
So no and no and no.
Here's Sarah again.
I guess there probably would have been a time when, I was arrogant enough to think I was building some sort of Rolodex that was relevant. And I certainly, knew some people, but nothing compared to what actual people who knew people knew. So no, I mean, and now the fun thing is like my friends are pretty connected and are pretty, you know, like I've got friends who are much more insiders, whatever that means. And, you know, one, it makes you realize like how stupid and naive you were. But then at the same time, you know, it's kind of, it's, you know, they're just like, you know, you've known them forever and that's just what it is. But I certainly am not, nor will I ever be, nor do I really want to be. I've been thinking a lot lately about what comes next for me. Like what am I trying to do? You know, I really love the work that I do. You know, I love the profession that I'm in. But I don't have a lot of, you know, where I'll be in 5 years. I mean, I imagine I'll be at the firm doing something. I mean, I hope that, you know, perhaps I'll be promoted. But there's not some sort of like, you know, I think that when I was younger, I probably thought I was going to be like Jessica O'Connell and like lead Emily's List, or, you know, like I had more like real clarity around what that could have looked like than I do now. So, yeah, I don't know. Where do you think you'll be in 5 years?
Oh my God, I don't know. I thought, well, and that's the funny, like when I started my master's program, I was like, this is what I'm going to do, and like this will be fine. And now I'm actually at a real crossroads because,
right?
What could I do? I mean, I could do consulting. I'd really like to be in advocacy, I think, eventually. But I'm also at a crossroads where I have the opportunity to be either a policy person or a media person. And right now, I'm a media person. And so the video that I produced for our office is on PBS tonight. And that feels really cool. And like important. And in a way that had I been working on like in the like trenches of a project, I don't know it would have felt that way.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm at a crossroads right now where I'm like too young to be having a career crisis. But I'm like, I don't know if I want to be a media person, if I want to be a policy person, or be a lobbyist. I don't know.
Right. I'll figure that out.
And it just kind of upsets me that you have people who basically trade away hours and minutes and seconds of their life for money. This whole fucking world is run on money. I'm sorry for swearing, but that it's something that passions me. You need to find something that you're passionate about, something that you would truly enjoy, and something that you're happy about. Find that, and then do it, regardless of if you get paid for it or not. We're in a society now where we're in DC. Everyone in DC is like, let's talk about the money. Let's talk about what position you have. Where can I get ahead in life? And that's not something that's not something I care about. That's not something people should care about. People should care about their life. People shouldn't care about their job. Because you only have one life to live, and don't waste it on something you don't want to do. And that's it.
So, that's the first episode. I'm not going to tell you what the moral of the story is, honestly, because I don't have it figured out myself. The only thing I do know is that in this new era of politics, it feels good to drop the veil and just get to know who people really are. If you're in the DC area, you should check out our happy hour. We would love to see you there and hear your story. Event details are posted on our website, dcdiary.com, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at DC Diary Podcast. Our happy hours are awesome, but you don't have to take my word for it. Here's a clip from our sound booth from November 2016, 2 days after the election.
In the face of all this negative news, I wanted to come here. And when I came here, I found people who were accepting. You know, we talked about politics, but it wasn't about politics, it was about bonding. I met someone here who was a Republican, and they were welcoming, and we talked, and we didn't have to talk about politics, but we did. And I've met a whole bunch of other people, and I'm new to the DC area, and it's been fantastic. It's been a great experience.
DC Diary is produced and distributed by Goat Rodeo in Washington, D.C. Check out some of Goat Rodeo's other shows by our talented and creative producers like Your Story Here, Between the Liner Notes, and Dispatches. I want to say thank you to my producer Adam Hainsfurther, also Lizzie Peabody, Morgan Gibbons, Ian Enright, and everybody at Goat Rodeo for their contributions to the show. Thanks to Kayla Eaton and Travis Wolf, our DC Diary team. Our graphics are designed by Katie Lee, and her website is katieleedesign.com. Thanks to Sam and Scott Logan, Steve Kelly, Todd Cherry, and Austin Bruno. Also, thank you so much to everybody who attended Happy Hour, recorded in the sound booth, or talked to us on tape. You might not have heard your clip in this episode, but there's plenty more episodes on the way. I'm Stephanie Logan, and this is DC Diary.
You're listening to Goat Rodeo.